Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
It's interesting what we've been talking about this morning deals with fruitfulness and being productive. And if you look at Genesis 9, it reiterates something that we find in chapter 1. And I know if I ask this question, you'll all know the answer. What's the first command given in Scripture? Be fruitful and multiply. And it's, I think we all know what it means. I'm going to go to Genesis 9 and read this. Sometimes I forget how often this is restated. And I'd like to examine it a little bit in light of what Jesus said, because he talks a lot about being fruitful. And Greg brought out some interesting things about being fruitful. One of those being that being fruitful is never instant. It doesn't happen overnight. There's an interesting writings, 178, that says you cannot partake of the fruit while it's in the flower because it's not fruit yet. But it will be. And so there's an element of patience and waiting. But Genesis 9, and God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. I heard one Bible commentator say, well, the earth is full. Don't eat any more. I thought it's kind of funny. If you've ever flown over the world, it's not full. The fear of you and the terror of you will be on every beast of the earth and on every bird of the sky, with everything that creeps on the ground, and all the fish of the sea. Into your hand they are given. Every moving thing that is alive shall be food for you. I give all to you as I gave the green plant. Only you shall not eat flesh with its life, that is, its blood. Surely I will require your lifeblood from every beast, I will require it. And from every man's brother, I will require the life of man. Whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed. For in the image of God he made man. As for you, be fruitful and multiply. Populate the earth abundantly and multiply in it. I'll read a few more verses after this that deal with the rainbow, which is the covenant God made. And it's an interesting covenant because almost no covenants in the Bible are made that are universal. This one is. This is not only to man, this is to all the creatures on the earth. The rainbow is this universal covenant. Now behold, I myself do establish my covenant with you and with your descendants after you, and with every living creature that is with you. The birds, the cattle, every beast of the earth with you, of all that comes out of the ark, even every beast of the earth, I establish my covenant with you, and all flesh shall never again be cut off by the water of the flood, neither shall there again be a flood to destroy the earth. God said, this is the sign of the covenant which I am making between me and you and every living creature that is with you for all successive generations. I set my bow in the cloud. And the Hebrew does not say rainbow, it says bow. And it shall be for a sign of a covenant between me and the earth. So it's a covenant with all the people, all the animals, and now God says it's the earth. It's a unique covenant, the rainbow. It shall come about when I bring a cloud over the earth that the bow will be seen in the cloud. And I will remember my covenant which is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh. And never again shall the water become a flood to destroy all flesh. When the bow is in the cloud, then I will look upon it to remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is on the earth. And God said to Noah, this is the sign of the covenant which I have established between me and all flesh that is on the earth. So this portion of Genesis 9, covenant that we're to be fruitful, to be multiply, we're to fill the earth. And I think it might be worth just stopping for a moment. Why does God want us to be fruitful? Now he states that we are in God's image. So when we reproduce, we are reproducing God's image. And when you look at other scripture, and I want to move to some others. Ezekiel 47, which is a picture of the tree of life, very like Revelation 22. By the river on its bank, on one side and on the other, will grow all kinds of trees for food. Their leaves will not wither, and their fruit will not fail. They will bear every month because their water flows from the sanctuary, and their fruit will be for food, and their leaves for healing. Speaking of a tree bearing fruit. Now, when John came and he was preaching to the people to repent because someone greater than him was going to follow, do you remember this comment that he made? The axe is already laid at the root of the trees. Therefore, every tree that does not what? Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. So it's not even an optional thing. We're called to bear fruit. And I got thinking about this because what happens, especially in religious settings, but it happens in all settings, is we'll use words until they lose their meaning. And we say, be fruitful. What does it mean? What does it look like? And I think we know in a physical sense, and I'll talk a little bit about that, because I like to look at trends, and I'm noticing that the trend among people is to not be fruitful. The trend among people is to develop patterns that not only discourage being fruitful, they prohibit it. And what's more, we're smarter than God, and what we're doing is better. And I'll point something else out to you. We have never figured out how to sustain a society that's in decline, population-wise. I'm not even talking about spiritually, emotionally, culturally, socially. When a society goes into decline, it can't sustain itself. Its infrastructure crumbles. And what happens to economies when there are fewer people? I don't know anything about economics, but this is what I know. If you want the economy to boom, you need growth. You need more people, you need more consumption. That's just how it works. John 15, this is probably the most famous one, and Greg mentioned this, and I think it's a really important point. All physical analogies break down if you get too detailed with spiritual analogies. You can take allegories to the point that you end up silly. But we have this picture of seed that grows and bears fruit, but in John 15, it's a vine. And we're not the plant in John 15. We're a branch. I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. I think King James is husbandman. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. So here's Yeshua, here's Jesus. If you've seen a grapevine, it's got a main trunk or branch, and branches come off of it. And Yeshua says, I am the true vine. The branches on me that don't bear fruit, he takes away, and every branch that bears fruit, he prunes it, so that it may bear more fruit. So that the purpose of the branches is to bear fruit. You're already clean because of the word which I've spoken to you. And the word clean here can be thought of as being clean, but it's really, you're already pruned. That's what it's talking about. Abide in me and I in you, as the branch cannot bear fruit of itself unless it abides in the vine, so neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. He who abides in me and I in him, he bears much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. How many of you have ever really stopped to think about, apart from me, you can do nothing? That's a very important statement, because frequently as human beings, we do things and we think it's us. Now, we mentioned this morning the abilities that we have. Greg saw Johnny out in the field, and we all have seen Johnny has tremendous ability in farming. And a lot of this he's had to develop. Some of it's inborn, and John Paul with musical arrangement, and I appreciate both of them very much. But who gave you the ability you have? And Yeshua is saying, apart from God, you can do nothing. You could be like Nebuchadnezzar, who stood on his palace and said, I'm the greatest king in the world. The next morning, he was eating grass like a beast. And his fingernails grew for 7 years. That's the part that grosses me out the worst. I don't know if you read that story and you're like, oh, that as human beings, we can lose our mind. We can lose the ability to think. And Yeshua is pointing out something that's so important, and Greg was bringing this out too. Recognize the ability that's in me from the vine. Even if I don't give God the glory, where does it come from? It still comes from God. You know, I've mentioned this before too. No matter how hard I worked, I could not be Michael Jordan. I don't have the physical abilities. And I'm old too. No, short's not the problem. Steph Curry is not that tall. He's a lot taller than I am, though. But no, seriously, we have innate abilities. We develop them. I mean, there are some people. I remember going to school with people who would come into the chorus. See, I grew up in a family that we started singing when we were this big. I can remember being 4 years old, standing up in front of the primary and singing with my brothers and sisters. And, you know, but there are people that have never sung a note. 9th grade, they come to the choir and somebody hits A and says, sing this note, and they hit something out in the stratosphere and everyone has a pained look on their face. And you think, well, this person could never sing. I know a person that was like that in 4 years, had a beautiful voice. The ability was in them. It had to be trained. It had to be cultivated. But it's still, where does it come from? It comes from God. Apart from me, this is important when we talk about being fruitful, because if we recognize where it comes from and give God the glory, it actually enhances our gift. But it reminds us who it comes from. Apart from me, you can do nothing. If anyone does not abide in me, he is thrown away as a branch and dries up. And they gather them and cast them into the fire, and they are burned. And we all know that. When you trim trees, Wayne comes out here and he trims all the fruit trees. And all the branches he cuts off are thrown away and burned. It's the branches he left that have a lot of fruit on them. And this year, my apple tree is going to have to be thinned. I don't know about the rest of you. There's something odd this year. Have you noticed? More flowers, more fruit. What in the world is going on? Again, is it not likely a physical picture of something spiritual? If you want to just get your eyes open wide, go over and look at my apple tree that's between our house and Dad's house. And it's got so many sets, the branches are starting to. I mean, the apples are on there, but it's because they're connected to the tree. You could take a branch full of apples. The minute you sever its life, the apples will die. Go ahead, Greg.
There's another comment that goes along with what you're talking about. And Jesus said, I only do what I see the Father do.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's really, when you think about it, and what did he tell us to do? We're to do as he did. And if he only does what he sees the Father doing. If you abide in me and my words abide in you, ask whatever you wish and it will be done for you. My Father is glorified by this, that you bear much fruit and so prove to be my disciples. Now those kind of statements leap out to me, because I grew up with the statement, so likewise whosoever he be of you that forsaketh not all that he has, cannot what? So you can't be his disciple if you don't forsake all that you have. Well, then there's this statement. By this will all men know that you are my disciples. That you love each other. And now Yeshua comes along and he says that when you bear much fruit, what? You prove to be my disciples. I'm one of these people, I have to wrap this all together. Okay. So, forsaking all that I have, recognizing it's all God's, is necessary. If that doesn't happen, I cannot be his disciple. The way the world knows I'm his disciple is they see that I love people. Did you ever know you can have great theology and teach sermons out the kazoo, and if you don't love people, they look and they go, nope, not a disciple. Disciples love people. Now, how do you prove that you're a disciple? You bear much fruit. And so, and this makes sense because what happens to me if I'm separated from the vine? I dry up and I'm cast away. If, just as the Father has loved me, I have also loved you, abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. These things I have spoken to you so that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be made full. This is my commandment, that you love one another, just as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, that one lay down his life for his friends. You are my friends if you do what I command you. No longer do I call you slaves. I prefer servant here. For the slave does not know what his master is doing, but I have called you friends. For all things that I have heard from my Father, I have made known to you. What Greg just said. What the Father does, I do, and you do. You did not choose me, but I chose you, and appointed you that you would go and bear fruit, and that your fruit would remain, so that whatever you ask of the Father in my name, he may give to you. Greg talked about letting your light shine. What's the relationship between letting your light shine and bearing fruit? See, again, I'm a person that I like the academics of Scripture study, but it doesn't do you a parcel of good if it doesn't somehow work Monday morning at work when you wish you were home sleeping. And you may still be. What does it mean to bear much fruit? And how does that... Revelation 22, which is exactly like Ezekiel 47, then he showed me a river of the water of life, clear as crystal, coming from the throne of God and of the Lamb. In the middle of its street, on either side of the river, was the tree of life, bearing 12 kinds of fruit, yielding its fruit every month, and the leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations. Ezekiel 47, Revelation 22, very similar picture. So, all this, why is the emphasis on bearing fruit? What's the purpose? And we see the word fruitful all through Scripture. It's the same root as fruit. It makes sense. It's the same in English, Greek, Hebrew. Fruit, fruitful, same thing. Why is it necessary that you bear fruit? Let's go back to a physical picture. Why do plants bear fruit? To reproduce. Kaya.
Because we live in a world with time.
Live in a world what?
With time.
Explain that.
Stuff's going to die, so you got to have more stuff.
Yeah, if you don't have fruit, you don't have anything that comes after.
Okay, so that's what I'm looking... I agree with you totally. We live in a world with time, and if we don't bear fruit, our light goes out. There's no more life. And when God said to multiply and fill the earth, what was he saying? He wanted life on the earth. He wanted his image to be shared. And it's interesting, too, something I don't think we want to forget that's in the natural. And it came up in Yeshua's parables. Many times you can't identify a plant, but if you see the fruit of the plant, you can always tell what the plant is. And this is where we delude ourselves sometimes as Christians. We'll think, I have it down, I understand it, I've been saved, I've been baptized, whatever it is that you use as the hallmark. But the truth is, when somebody bumps into you, they know who you are by your fruit. And Yeshua made this very clear. He said, bad fruit, bad tree. Bad trees don't bear good fruit. Good trees do not bear bad fruit. And in the story of the tares, why did they leave the tares with the wheat? They went to destroy the wheat, and guess what? You couldn't identify it, could you? Until the tares bear fruit and the wheat bears fruit. Then you know what they are. So being fruitful is very important, not only so we can propagate, so we can reproduce, but it identifies. Now, see, many of us are better gardeners than others, and I'm kind of an indifferent gardener. I know some things. I can look in the garden and usually tell what a plant is. But I can tell you the absolute truth. When it first comes up, sometimes I cannot tell a cucumber from a cantaloupe. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Why? They look the same. But believe me, when they bear fruit, calling a cucumber fruit might be questionable. But they taste different. And I don't mind cucumbers. I'm not like my dad who just hated them. But I think one of the things we need to realize, and I'm going to get practical here for a minute, is that God does want us to still be fruitful and multiply. And in our society in 1950, which was a good year, that's the year I was born, the birth rate was 37 live births per 1,000 in the population annually. That doesn't sound like that much, does it? It's less than half that today. It's 18. In fact, we are not maintaining our population at this point in the U.S. And some people will see this as good. Why is the birth rate dropping? And I'm not saying it's all bad or it's all good. I'm just going to examine some trends with you. Why people don't choose to be fruitful and multiply. Or why it doesn't happen. Children generally come from nuclear families which consist of a father and a mother and children. Now this construct is changing, but in changing that construct we are seeing fewer children. And so I've listed some things that have decreased population growth. And the first one I've listed is fear. Fear is a huge one. When I was in high school, what do you remember? Does anybody remember what we were afraid of in the late 60s? Nuclear holocaust. In fact, I've told you before, Dick Casper, when I first met Dick Casper, actually when I first met Steve, and Dick was a builder, and you know the number one thing he was building? Bomb shelters. And people were afraid to bring children into this world because they were going to get nuked. They're going to get caramelized by a future atomic event. And people were in terror. They were in fear over it. Now we've had, anybody here remember Rachel Carson's Silent Spring? I'm making you old references here, I realize that. Well, she wrote a book that said that the way we were handling the environment was going to destroy the planet. And so people were afraid to bring more children into an environment that was increasingly poisoned, increasingly hostile to life, and so they were in fear. When I went to college, they gave us a book to read called The Population Bomb by Paul Ehrlich. Not one prediction he made has come to pass. He was wrong on every count. And yet he has changed American society in the way we think, which tells you another thing that's happened. This is not the subject of my talk today, and that's we live in a post-rational age. We don't worry about what is or what is factual. We worry about what feels right. Well, that's okay sometimes, but sometimes it's not so good. Behind this whole, in my view, editorial comment, fear of GMOs, organic, all the rest. It drives me crazy. It's post-rational. In any case, people were terrified that we were bringing too many kids into the planet and we were destroying the planet. This is a logical thing. It should be looked at. But here's the interesting thing. Not one prediction he made was right because he doesn't understand human ingenuity. Nevertheless, in the world today, in Europe, UK, Russia, the United States, all populations are decreasing. And if you think, and speaking of fear, what states in the U.S. have the highest birth rates? the states with the lowest unemployment, the states with the best economic prosperity, in other words, the states with hope. If you're afraid of a nuclear holocaust, if you're afraid the environment is going to go to pieces on you, whatever it is you're afraid of, you're not sure you want to bring children into this environment. Fear colors your decision. Another thing that causes a lot of fear, which I've seen personally in people that I know, is that if you were raised in a family, in a situation, and growing up as a child was painful, hurtful, many times you do not want to have children and put them through what you went through. And so I know people that grew up in big families that want big families. And I know people that grew up in big families that don't want any children ever. Because all they saw in childhood was pain, hurt, abandonment, whatever it might be. And this is real. This kind of pain is there. And it also is paralleled by the failure of the nuclear family. Because as the nuclear family has declined, we have more and more people growing up in situations where it is not happy, where it is not peaceful, where this is just something that's happening. And I have a cousin, in fact it might be my oldest cousin on my mom's side, but one of her daughters made the decision she would never marry and never have children because her two older sisters contracted juvenile diabetes. The one died, the other one is severely blind, and her brother, who was brilliant, was bipolar and committed suicide. And she said, not having children. And so she's not going to get married, not going to have children. And I'm bringing this all out to point out one of the reasons we don't obey is we're afraid. Everybody understand that? We're afraid. That's another reason, and I kind of touched on this, that we see the decline in population growth is economic. People growing up today, and I don't know if we've really faced this, but when I grew up, really the standard of living was far lower, but the standard of hope was far higher. The belief that the people I grew up with, that they could get a job, raise a family, own a home, all of that, they all believed it was possible. That whether or not they're right, the young people today do not believe that's possible. They're not positive they can raise a family, buy a home, whatever. And so it creates, and it was interesting to me that last year the state with one of the higher birth rates was North Dakota. Why? And this was before oil did the thing. I wonder what's happened now. And then here's an interesting one that I see happening today, which is foreign to my thinking. When I was growing up, and here I'm telling you what was, not necessarily what's right. When I was growing up, the number one goal of kids going to high school was to get married and have a family. Even the people that had a strong career track, that career was to allow them to have a family. That was the thing they wanted, was children. It was that, what you said, Kaya, it was the ability to provide something eternal. Something that endures. And so another thing we find destroying the population growth today is that no one wants anything that will interfere with their lifestyle. We've become increasingly independent. We don't need other people. This isn't true, but this is how we think. And so people opt out of marriage and lifestyle because they are expensive choices. Have you ever seen the number of dollars in front of the numbers? I mean, the dollar signs in front of the numbers that it costs to raise a kid? And you think about it, people will go, I can either choose my career or I can have a family. Let's go for the career. And then they hit 45 and they're mad and they wish they had the family. Seen that happen more than once. But, and here's the other thing. I actually remember hearing about actresses and models that said, well, I'm not going to have kids. It will ruin my figure. Really?
Age ruins your figure.
You noticed that, Margot? You know, the nice thing is you get just blind enough you can't tell. But Yeshua made an interesting comment, Jesus did, and I think it pertains here. And I strongly believe that we should raise young people with hope and with the belief that there's nothing greater than raising a family. I mean, those of you with kids, have you done anything that compares to having a family? No! I mean, I have, quote, a career, actually, in the place in the dictionary where it says, Jack of all trades and master of none, my picture appears there. But it's the most painful thing you'll do. It makes you the most vulnerable of anything you'll do, but it is by far the greatest reward because it forces you to give everything you've got and then more. It follows in with what Yeshua said, he that loses his life will find it, and he that finds his life will lose it. Your kids will take energy you haven't got. They'll take tears you have no more of. But the reward, I mean, it's a little bit like being a teacher. I've never seen any profession that looks worse to me than teaching. And I've done a little teaching, but what I noticed about teaching is the rewards are incredible when the light goes on in a student. Or when someone comes back 20 years later and says, you made a difference in my life. I mean, I didn't do a lot of teaching. I taught a little Bible, and I've had kids come back to me 15 years later and just drop a comment, and it's like, wow, because you had no idea. And I'm sure Lois and Teresa and the different ones that teach, Doug, all of you, you know what I'm talking about, Cecilia. But it's an expensive profession. If you're going to go into teaching because you want to make money and have an easy lifestyle, you made a mistake. You're dumb. That's not what to teach or to be a parent is to say, all right, the goal is worth it. I'm going to pour my life out. There will be nothing left. Everything will be squeezed out of me, but it's worth it. To have a family, to be fruitful and multiply, will cost you everything you have. There'll be nothing left. I see these pictures in nature. When cows come off the range with their calves, I can tell you the big calves without looking at them. Because I look at the cows. And the skinniest cow that looks the most worn out has got the best calf. No personal. But I think we all understand what I'm talking about is that to be fruitful and multiply is an investment that really, it costs you your life. And another thing Yeshua said, because I was looking at all the comments that Jesus makes about bearing fruit, and I know you know this one, John 12. Truly, truly, I say to you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the sky and dies, falls into the sky. And it says earth right here. Truly, truly, I say to you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. And that's how it works. You know, when Greg was talking about the alfalfa and Johnny going out there making sure that hay is just right. The seeds that produce the alfalfa, they only make alfalfa when they give themselves away. There's nothing. What's left of the seed? The husk, it's gone. But what have they done? And part of this too, and just a couple other comments here I'll make. A huge thing that's happened in our society, which of course I decry, because I think it's hurt us so much in terms of intimacy, tenderness, compassion, is that we have separated sex from reproduction. Sex has become an industry in and of itself. The sex industry in the world is in the hundreds of billions. And this industry wants to have sex without commitment and without children. What's happening now, we have a lot of people that are getting a bum deal. They're getting a counterfeit. They think they've found the joy that God has given them in physical union without what naturally comes from it. And I'm not here to point fingers because sexual sin is one of those things that started right off probably about Genesis 2. I mean, it's human, but it doesn't mean it's... I look at myself, and I am so grateful for teachers and parents and for even a society that said sex belongs in a marriage. It belongs in a covenant. It belongs in a place where two people have decided to give themselves to each other. They've decided to lose their lives for the sake of this union. And if they mess up, they repent and come back to what's right. Instead of what now today is, there is no definition of mess up, and you do whatever you want. And this is my opinion. I think it's cost us all. I think we've lost something. There's something precious and tender and infinitely beautiful that's gone. The very definition of sacred is that there's a wall around something. It has a perimeter around it. And when sex is not sacred, it's like a fire that breaks out of the furnace. It burns down the house. It's a wonderful thing. That's another thing that's had a huge impact on being fruitful and multiplying. And out of this has become a pornography industry, an abortion industry, you name it. Anything that can keep us from experiencing the results of our actions. And finally, another one that's part of this same thing is gender confusion. And there's a lot of real pain in the world today of people trying to figure out who they are. I am not here to point fingers. But those of us who know Yeshua, who know Jesus, should be healers, not condemners. But on the other hand, telling somebody who's purple that they're yellow because they think they're yellow, they're still purple. Right? I don't get lying to people. And I think lying to people makes them more unhappy. We need spiritual healers that heal what's wrong in us. And anyway, this gender confusion, you think about it. If I'm a man and think I'm a woman or I don't know, what are the chances that I'm going to be fruitful and multiply? And I think, have you ever stopped to realize that first command in Genesis 1 has all these ramifications? It touches everything. And something else that came out of this as I was thinking about it, I have this veterinary background, and we're called to go and bear fruit. You know, Greg has been stressing, let your light shine. Well, I've been thinking about, if I let my light shine, I'm being fruitful. What God has put in me, I'm sharing that. And when you share your light and I share my light, there's more light. There's a reproduction. But what happens if I don't share my light? What happens if I'm sterile? There's a terrific scourge that livestock experienced 60, 70 years ago called the screwworm plague. Now, a screwworm is very similar. You see those metallic-looking flies early in the season that come out of dead carcasses? You probably were happy to hear that. That's where they come from. Well, the screwworm is very like that. When it sees a wound on an animal or a person, it lays eggs on that wound. Within 24 hours, those eggs have hatched and producing larvae, and those larvae burrow into the flesh and cause secretions. And anyway, it makes it so it's more attractive to more screwworms. You see this bloody, pulpy mess, which you look frowning there, Tina. More animals can actually die from the infestation of screwworms, laying the eggs, the larvae growing. And anybody that's been around sheep and cattle, I know Ron's seen it a lot of, you understand what fly blown is. You get a wound, flies lay maggots, it will actually cause death. You know, they could not figure out how to destroy screwworms because it was the south of the U.S. and into Mexico. It was destroying the cattle industry and the sheep and all the livestock. Somebody had the brilliant idea let's radiate male screwworm flies and release them into the environment. It worked. They released thousands and thousands and thousands. And every time a female screwworm fly mates, she mates once. She stores the sperm, and every batch of eggs she lays comes from that first mating. If that first mating was to a sterile fly, she never produces larvae. And I was thinking about that and thinking, Lord, if there would be anything horrible for a believer, it would be to be sterile. To not be fruitful. To not, because do you realize we literally destroyed a population of billions and billions of flies by releasing sterile flies into the environment, and they could not be fruitful. A couple more things that I'd like to share with you. When you think about Jesus, Yeshua, he doesn't talk so much about being fruitful and multiplying. He talks about being fruitful. And in the parable of the sower, I think you all know this parable. And maybe let me just stop for a minute and ask. I've already asked this, but now I want to know. It's easy to see what the fruit is when we tell people to be fruitful and multiply. When Jesus tells us to bear much fruit, what's he talking about? What is he looking for?
Doing something good with their lives.
Good works, doing something good? Because think about this now. Yeshua went out of the house and was sitting by the sea, and large crowds gathered to him, so he got into a boat and sat down. And the whole crowd was standing on the beach. And he spoke many things to them in parables, saying, Behold, the sower went out to sow, which is a farmer went out to drill. That's how we'd say it nowadays. And as he sowed, some seeds fell beside the road, and the birds came and ate them up. Others fell on the rocky places where they did not have much soil, and immediately they sprang up because they had no depth of soil. But when the sun had risen, they were scorched, and because they had no root, they withered away. Others fell among thorns, and the thorns came up and choked them out. And others fell on the good soil and yielded a crop, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. He who has ears, let him hear. Okay, now we have a story about a farmer who went out to sow. Who's the farmer? We're in trouble if we don't know who the farmer is. It's God, right? We all agree? Because if we don't agree, we're going to get too far. What's the seed?
People.
I better read the interpretation. Hear then the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what was sown in his heart. So the seed is the word of the kingdom, the word. And you all knew that. What was sown in the heart? So what's the ground? It's the heart. It's the person. This is the one on whom seed was sown beside the road, the one that snatched away. The one on whom seed was sown on the rocky places, this is the man who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy. Yet he has no firm root in himself, but is only temporary, and when affliction or persecution arises because of the word, immediately he falls away. And the one on whom seed was sown among the thorns, this is the man who hears the word, and the worry of the world and the deceitfulness of wealth choke the word, and it becomes unfruitful. And the one on whom seed was sown on the good soil, this is the man who hears the word and understands it, who indeed bears fruit and brings forth some 100-fold, some 60, and some 30. It's interesting how the different evangelists, what we call the synoptic, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they all gave the same picture of the interpretation, but it's just a few different words added. I like what it says in Mark. The worries of the world and the deceitfulness of riches and the desires for other things enter in and choke the word, and it becomes unfruitful. And in Luke it says, the seed which fell among the thorns, these are the ones who have heard, and as they go on their way, they are choked with worries and riches and pleasures of this life, and bring no fruit to maturity. But the seed in the good soil, those are the ones who have heard the word in an honest and good heart, and hold it fast and bear fruit with perseverance. All right, this is something to think about because Greg was talking about timing. If the seed is the Word of God, the Word of the kingdom, and we are the soil, our hearts, where that seed goes, what is the fruit? What are we bearing when the fruit is planted? We've already established that if we have an apple tree, it won't bear oranges. Never. It never will, unless you graft it on there. So, wouldn't you agree that as human beings, we've probably experienced all four of those scenarios in our life? We've had times. What creates a situation in your life where you're like the road? Where you're hard. Anybody have a place in your heart where you're hard? Yeah. If you've been hurt, if you've sinned repeatedly, I mean, there are a lot of things that could create a situation in our life where God would bring this word. Greg was talking about healing this morning and the wonderful thing, Lois going in to have the surgery, which we all agree is a wonderful thing. The fact that that's there. It's very possible for someone who has been sick forever, when someone comes along and says, God wants to heal you, that the seed just bounces. They can't, they have no ability to take that word in. The shallow seed is an interesting one to me because I always think, well, how do I control whether or not I'm shallow? Because would you agree with me the purpose of this parable is to deal with my soil? Otherwise, why tell the parable? If all this parable is telling me, well, you thorny old loser. I mean, what's the purpose of it? It's to somehow when you think about it, what makes shallow ground, in this situation, the soil was on top of rock. So, seeds would sprout, but boing, they hit the rock, then they die. In us, this is just my opinion, probably the way you plow hard ground is by persevering. By hanging on, by not giving up. And I think my guess, and I could be wrong, is that most of us who know the Lord, who hear His Word, our struggle is the thorn patch. The things that come in and choke out the truth. The things that come in and distract us and separate us. I think this is why what Greg was talking about, and he was so enthusiastic about it, and I enjoyed it. If you don't give voice to the good things that God is doing in your life, then I think that these distractions and these thorns choke you out. There's something about what we fix our eyes on is what we see. And I think you all are quite aware of the fact that your eyes have the ability to focus at different lengths. And if you're focused on one thing, if I focus on my finger, I'm aware of all the rest of you out there, but I really can't see what you're doing. And if I focus on my finger and nothing else, this becomes my entire reality. There's something in being fruitful that requires a focus on it came from God, the glory goes to God, and everything comes from Him. I think it's interesting. We'll pick on John Paul since he's sitting here. I don't understand how to arrange music. I really don't. I can hear music and say I like it or I don't. But if you, and I think, man, a French horn would sound great there, or a trombone. I'm picking on the two best kind of instruments, of course. But seriously, I can appreciate a nice piece of music. But if you said, all right, John, we have a 100-piece orchestra, arrange this song, I'd be like, shoot me. I don't have the ability to do that. I don't have the ability or the training.
You just gave him some bad ideas.
Yeah, see, he hears 100-piece orchestra, and he's going, ooh, neat. Me, I'm like, I don't mind hearing it. But for John Paul to be fruitful is to produce music. It's to take the spark in you that you have developed, that you have grown, and to bring glory to God, to bless people. And the great thing about this, all of us have fruit to bear. It isn't just limited. And Greg's brought this out, and I really appreciate it. I don't need to be what John Paul is, and vice versa. In fact, the body's made much richer when we're all blessed and honored in who we are. Greg, you had your hand.
There's an interesting word that goes along with that scripture. It's the word yoke. I've never even really considered that, where if you want to take my yoke upon you and learn of me, what in the world does that mean? Well, in light of letting your light shine and letting the fruit come, that idea of being in the yoke that God's given you to be in, to push, to pull, to work, and to achieve what He's given you to do, and do that with a perseverance and endurance, and an eye single to His glory, that's where it's at. And for me anyway. And if that's done, if I've got an eye single to His glory, and I'm working with the Holy Spirit that is saying, this is the way that you walk. And the way that I walk may be different than the way you walk. But nonetheless, God requires me to be in that yoke and walk the way that He's given me to walk.
Yeah, and that's a good point as we wind this up. Everybody know what a yoke looks like? I mean, we have some older people here that worked with them. But a yoke actually goes around the neck of the horse or the ox. And it is confining. It's what Greg just said. It disciplines. It brings an element of direction. What's that?
I don't want to change your subject.
No, go ahead.
Rick asked us all to appreciate one another. Do you want to say that? Gratitude will grow deep roots.
Gratitude will grow deep roots. And that brings up to what I wanted to finish this with. I think the fruit that we have is what God's put in us, the gifts that are in us. You know, every one of us have benefited here from other people's stuff. I remember when we first moved into the house that Annette and Carrie are in, I am brain dead when it comes to yards, houses, you name it. Dean saved my life. He came over there and he didn't even tell me I was stupid, but I could tell what he was thinking. But I mean, he helped me put in my swamp cooler. He got me started putting the lawns. I could finish. But all of that, I couldn't have done it without him. Do I have a great desire to go design sprinkler systems? No. But I need him in my life. And the people, you understand? We all need each other. And it's so important to recognize that not one gift is better than the other. That's why I think we get in trouble this way. I mean, it's like every one of us benefit. Like Greg, that's a very great insight. He sees out there Johnny going out, being so careful when he bales that hay, when he cuts that hay. We all benefit from that. That does interest me a lot more than sprinkler systems, the hay and whatever. But the thing about it is, we have so much to give each other. Let me just say, what's important, that gift that's in you needs to come out as a fruit of the Spirit. And this is one of the things I noticed. A lot of people that get into Scripture study, what comes out of them is orneriness, division, factions. And do you know what Paul said? Those are fruits of the flesh. The fruit of the Spirit, and I'll bet you can say them. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. The gift in John Paul to do music. The gift in Johnny to farm. Sister Mary, praise. All of us, we have all these things. I need to remind myself, that yoke you mentioned, Greg, all right, the gift in me, is it coming out as love, joy, peace, patience, kindness? Because if it isn't, it's not the Spirit. And it's an interesting study to look at Galatians 5, where it talks about the deeds of the flesh and the fruit of the Spirit. And when you think, we're called to bear much fruit, but our fruit, whether it's music, engineering, farming, cooking, there are so many gifts that make up the body of the Messiah. But every one of them can be manifested in love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. And see, it's interesting to me how different we all are. At the dairy, we have Ron and I and Ben and David, and everybody pitches in and does pretty much the same things, but we all have our unique abilities. I'm much more interested in how a cow looks than how something works. I just want it to work. And I'd be in big trouble if Ron weren't down there to make sure it works. And, the great thing is all of us do have the creative spark, the fire, the genius in there that God brings out as His fruit. Let's stand. Sister Betsy, would you close for us, please? Amen. Communion at 1:45.